Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to our channel and thanks for logging on. Today we are discussing my favorite Generation 3 Vacheron Constantin Overseas sports watch. It's the Overseas Chronograph 5500V-147. The brown sunburst dial in stainless steel case. You can see and you can purchase this spectacular third generation manufacture movement Geneva hallmark Vacheron sports chronograph on our website. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you enjoy these videos, and please click on the card in the upper right hand corner of the screen at any time during this video to see our full sales listing for this watch with additional accessories included in the sale, including the 2 accessory straps, high-resolution images for your desktop, and naturally full pricing details for this and our entire collection of pre-owned Vacheron Constantin watches. This is a watch that stuns, excites, and ultimately delivers on the promise of its $30,000 retail price. This is an exceptional alternative to competitors from Audemars Piguet and Patek Philippe, equally viable as an alternative to a traditional Royal Oak chronograph or an offshore, a competitor to the new Aquanaut chronograph, and an impressive entry with higher technology and more capability than any Nautilus. This is a watch that simply stuns and must be appreciated in the flesh on the wrist. You'll have to suffice with my flesh for the time being, as I'm going to give you the best impression I can on a 16 centimeter circumference wrist with an oval profile. Now my wrist is flat across the top, which wears well with this timepiece. It's large but not oversized. 42.5 millimeters across the round of its cushion case. That doesn't include the crown or chronograph pushers, which, unlike the current Royal Oak chronograph, here remain true screw downs for absolute security. The watch is thicker than most Vacherons, but not thick in an absolute sense, as the timepiece is 13.8 millimeters thick with a generously sloped Maltese cross motif bezel. It will slide underneath any jacket cuff and likely quite a few dress shirts beneath, but this is also a viable sports watch for times when you're going to be wearing short sleeves. A watch that is very wearable, though large from lug to lug. I have to emphasize that it fits well even on a tiny wrist like mine. The timepiece lug to lug measures 50.6 millimeters, which is substantial. I do have to mention, however, that with the bracelet fitted, it has a little bit of a stiffness and a flare, such that if you were to measure the rigid outermost outcropping from side to side, then you get a more robust measurement of 57.8 millimeters that really gives you a better sense of what the stance of the wrist looks like. It's a watch that on the wrist appears as though it's a 44 or a 45. Now, don't lose heart, because nevertheless, the watch has a leather and a rubber accessory strap that I believe makes it viable on wrists as small as 14.5 centimeters in circumference, and I can easily see the bracelet being worn on a wrist as small as 14.5 centimeters in circumference. With the strap, it wouldn't even be a contest. This is a very wearable large watch. It's also a very comfortable large watch, as the bracelet is smartly designed. There are plenty of channels between the links to aerate the wrist, and you'll note that the scalloped portions of the underside of the links are designed expressly to avoid pinching skin and pulling hair. All individual links are removable for precise sizing. You'll note Vacheron's Maltese cross motif, a recurring theme throughout the links. You'll also note that the same fine finishing from the Generation 2 and the Generation 1 is back in force, as you can see the bevel of the case flank flowing into the bevel of the individual links. The beautiful gradual stepped taper that's actually easier to see than it is to feel. It feels smooth, not like a sawtooth or staircase from the side. That's how good the tolerances are. You'll also note that in between the links, the facets comprising the Maltese cross motif have been polished. The attention to detail is truly stunning, and all of it is hand executed. A clasp, substantial with twin triggers. This one is not friction fit, nor does it use a cheap clamshell. When closed, this one offers immense security. And you'll note the Maltese cross motif once more, unified in the center, retained by the clasp, released only by the depression of both triggers. You can also see the underside of the clasp is nicely curved to match the curvature of the underside of the wrist, and all internal elements of the clasp are high polished to give you a sense of the attention to detail there as well. Now, of course, there is a quick release system for this new bracelet, just as there is a quick release system for the straps. It's that easy. You simply apply fingernail, and my fingernails are quite minimal at this point. You remove the bracelet. Now you can fit that rubber strap that I mentioned is great for smaller wrists, and I've actually tested the theory So I can attest to the comfort both of the bracelet and, for smaller wrists, the straps. Now the bracelet is substantial, just like the case. You can see a large cushion profile. The family resemblance to the Generation 1 and 2 Overseas is strong, and there's also a clear link to the 1977 Vacheron 222 sports watch by York Heisek that inspired the entire Overseas line. You'll also note that when you view the watch from angles other than the straight-on soldier shot that you see on the internet, the proportions of the links of the bracelet actually match the case flank quite well. It's a watch that doesn't look right when viewed from head-on on the internet. It's a watch that is imposing and impressive when viewed in 3 dimensions and in person, and you can see that to good effect in this video. Now moving inboard, you can see that the tops of the case are satin finished. The bevel is beautifully polished, but it's not exclusively polished. Again, details. Look in between the flares of the Maltese cross, and you'll see that the actual sheer flank of the bezel has been vertically satin finished in between each polished outcropping. The dial is the pièce de résistance for the B147 variant of the Overseas Chronograph. You can see it has a rich and explosive chocolate metallic tone. Whether you want to call it brown bronze, whether you want to call it chocolate, tobacco, Nutella, I don't care. It's sensational. This is a good look, and it's also the most individualist and distinctive in the Overseas collection. Silver, blue, and black. Let's face it, the Aquanauts, the Nautilus, the Royal Oaks and offshores of the world were there long before Vacheron arrived on the scene in '96 with the first Overseas. The brown, however, is something that Vacheron does that really none of the others are actively pursuing. That's why this watch is most distinctive and, in my opinion, most fetching with the brown sunburst. And while blue might be a vogue of the moment, I really do feel that this is the dial from the current generation that is going to age best. It is also, based on my observation, the rarest and the least commonly ordered. So this is going to be a special watch, not just today, which it is, but into the future as people realize just how important the brown dial Overseas Gen 3 was. Hopefully it's continued, but if it's not, here's your opportunity. Now you can see that the dial is also beautifully detailed. All the indices as well as the hands at center, white gold, applied. They have wonderful luster and a depth to them. Stay tuned, there will be a Lume shot. You can also see that there is a Rayhaut or a concave chapter ring, easy to use as a reference for chronograph seconds and minutes. And then you'll note that all of the sub-registers for constant seconds, chronograph hours, and chronograph minutes are countersunk, and there's another focal plane about the dial. I'm going to screw out the crowns for the chronograph functions and start right up. Now, few things to note. There is a quick set for the date. The movement does not hack. That's perhaps the one feature that the caliber 5200 is lacking. But what you will note is that there's absolutely no jump or stagger when you start the chronograph, because this is a vertical clutch chronograph. The vertical clutch system that engages the mechanism allows you to start without any jump or stagger, but also leave the chronograph running. If you just want to have a highly visible center seconds hand, just leave it running. No additional wear and tear with a vertical clutch system. Now, compared to the old Frédéric Piguet-based movement that was featured in the Generation 2 Overseas Chronograph, the 5200 has a much more pronounced and rifle-like report. It's almost like the bolt of a rifle when you're actuating the chronograph pusher. It is sharp, it is crisp, and it's far more audible than the good but not great feedback of the original caliber 1137, Frédéric Piguet 1185, and the older Overseas. This one's just more of a pleasure to operate. You're going to want to start and stop your chronograph for the sheer pleasure of interacting with that mechanism. Now the column wheel, which you can see, with black polished crenellated cap. I'm going to try to get a little bit closer here. Zooming in. See if we can bring this into focus for you. Okay, and now you can see caliber 5200. It is impressively spec'd. The winding mass featuring the compass rose pattern is beautifully engraved. The movement does bear the Poinçon de Genève, the exalted hallmark of the most finely finished movements in the traditions of the city and canton of Genève. I will also say that this is a full watch standard Geneva hallmark. So since roughly mid-2012, the emblem blazoned on the case as well as the movement, it is a test of the materials, fit, finish, and ultimately precision of a fully cased up watch. So the Geneva hallmark, not a target that stands still, but rather one that moves, and Vacheron keeping up with a 54 joule movement that packs a 52-hour power reserve. It's a very impressive and accomplished caliber that is also the debut of a display caseback on the Overseas family, as in the past you weren't able to really see what you paid for. You can see the finish is gorgeous. Cote de Genève, black polished cap to the balance on the regulator, black polished screw heads, of course a highly finished and engraved and partly skeletonized compass rose rotor. You also want to know that it's water resistant to 150 meters, and though it has a display caseback, nevertheless it retains the Generation 2 watch's anti-magnetism of 25,000 ampere per meter. So technically speaking, this is the one to go for, not the Royal Oak chronograph that's still using the Frederic Piguet caliber from the last generation Overseas, not the new Aquanaut chronograph that's already waitlisted years. This is the one you can buy now, and it's the most accomplished, full-featured, and visually distinctive of that entire class of ultra haute de gamme sports watches. This one lays the Royal Oak chronograph and the offshore low, cuts them down at the knees, and offers a counterpoint with far more tech and refinement than either the Aquanaut or the Nautilus, any model. You need to consider this watch among the best of the best from the denizens of the top level of high horology. In the sports watch class, I'm tempted to say it has no equal. See and decide for yourself on our website. And we're back with the Vacheron Constantin Overseas Chronograph Generation 3. Though the dial is brown by day, it is blue by night. See it by the light of day with all accessories included on our website.